Eleonore, first off, thanks for being on the show. It's a real pleasure. I'm really happy to have you on today. In preparation for this interview, obviously researched a little bit about your background, and you have an impressive career. Before we talk about career, I want to talk about maybe more the education piece and your general interest. It seems that you've been interested in technology for a long time. So, just curious, how did you stumble into the world of tech? What prompted you to want to learn more and be more knowledgeable about it?
For sure. Well, thanks for having me in the first place. And I'm part of the generation that, was a teenager without technology, and I was finishing high school when the first iPhone came out. And that changed everything for me in my social life, at school. Everyone was just kind of like, what is this new shiny thing? And we all wanted one. And that was the first time I really thought about technology in my life. And I was like, well, this changes all habits, all paradigms. And I started reading about Steve Jobs and the computers. And I took computers, like desktop computers, for granted because of we had an old Mac at home and so on. And I just was amazed by one single product could get the attention of pretty much everyone on earth, and how it completely changed habit for everyone. I was like, only tech really can do that. So I just started reading about technologies, following more like the classic entrepreneurs, the thought leaders in the industry, as I was in high school. And I knew early on I was probably going to go to business school. I had a good mind for numbers and so on. Really loved people that were building things and kind of building innovation through business models and things like that. So I went to HSC in Montreal, and I wasn't too sure which angle to take. Was it marketing, finance, so on? And but clearly, I was just really good with numbers and dollar signs, I guess, in a way. But couldn't really find my path into what kind of career I wanted. A lot when you go through business school, especially in undergrad, like everyone kind of pushes you to go through investment banking, consulting, accounting, the big fours, all those kind of like very traditional path. And I just couldn't really find where where I fit in. And during my undergrad, I spent a summer at Stanford University. They have a bunch of programs for international students. You can apply if you get in. You take a few classes over the summer, or they have also entrepreneurship certificates and things like that. And at Stanford, I was blown away. It was like going to Disney World as a kid. Everyone I met was so interesting, and I discovered venture capital. I was like, wait, I love finance. There's a NASA class that's dedicated in investing in stuff I've been reading about for years, and I really, really enjoy. So I was like, well, that's probably a good place to start my career and look into. So I came back after that summer, and I searched everywhere and discovered, the ecosystem that was back in 2013. So the ecosystem was present in Montreal, but it was nowhere near what it is today. Um, and one thing also that's very special about Stanford, Silicon Valley, same thing in Boston with MIT and Harvard, is that the university is really at this center of the ecosystem. There's a lot of synergies between the VCs, the entrepreneurs on campus, innovation that's built on campus, research labs, and so on. Everything is really made to be commercialized, and there's this clear relationship between the university and the surrounding companies. And I didn't find that in Montreal. I should say we started talking about startups. We had like startup weekends, all things like that. There was maybe one or two accelerators on campus. There was also very few synergies between Polytechnique, for example, the engineering school, and the business school. And I was like, wait, there's something we can learn from, those big startup ecosystem like Silicon Valley and Boston. So I started looking into, what was really happening on campus for tech startup ecosystem VCs. And I met a few folks that had been working on VC initiative for student, very underground, like wasn't really officially a student club or anything like that, but just be really good people with interest. And a lot of all of these people are still my friends, or some good business relationship today, and are in the ecosystem as tech lawyers, as other VCs, working for LPs and so on. And I met a bunch of people through that group, and we were like, well, I think now we could try to build a student run venture fund. That was kind of always the vision of that group of people. Student run venture fund existed in the US and a few places in Europe as well. The big ones in the US are Dome Room Fund, which is attached to First Round Capital, and Rough Draft Ventures, which is backed by General Catalyst. So very, two excellent seed fund, having really boots on the ground with students and universities to back entrepreneurs very, very, very early on. So I got into venture trying to build that, a student-run venture fund, initially in Montreal, and the vision was always to kind of build it across Canada afterwards. So at the same time, I was finishing grad school. I was on the path to becoming a CPA, so I took accounting of all the different alternative on campus to finish business school with. I was working at EY and doing school, and kind of was trying to get every single I could spend on building Frontier Venture, the student-run fund. I did, working around the clock, obviously, and I was lucky enough to meet Sophie Forêt, who's the managing partner at Brightspark. That's also a funny story and a good lesson for especially all the young women out there. So Brightspark, I was following all the VCs on Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on. Sophie's obviously one of the only women in the industry. Like back then, there was even fewer women as partners in the industry. And Brightspark had put on a job posting. They were looking for someone with 5-7 years of experience, usually like looking for a finance background, someone that could help with the back office, the fund finances, and kind of learn the investment side of the business as well. And I was, finishing grad school at like a few months of experience at EY. So I didn't apply, but I shared the job posting on my own LinkedIn and my Twitter saying, like, hey, this looks like a really interesting job. Maybe someone in my network would be interested. And Sophie reached out saying, like, hey, I saw you shared her job posting. Maybe you would know someone, but come grab coffee with me. So I was very excited, like, oh, Sophie was, reaching out to me. So I went, and she's like, oh, well, talk to me about yourself, and explain what I'm doing with the student run fund. And she's like, well, it sounds like you want to work in VC. And I was like, yeah, down the line, like that's definitely one of my goals. And so on. She's like, well, you didn't apply on my job posting. And as a young woman, I answer like, well, I don't have, most of the requirements you're looking for, I don't have. And she's like, do you know how many guys just didn't ask themselves this question and applied anyway? And we kind of like got into that conversation about women leadership, women in industry. And 3 weeks later, I was quitting my job at EY and dropping out of the CPA program and joining Brightspark. It's been 5 years now, and it was definitely one of the best decisions in my life, and a very good leadership lesson from Sophie, the first of many that that came afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's just a fantastic story that I think I'm really happy you started with it. I find reading and preparing for the day, I find it's almost like a thing that you would watch in a movie and like and not believe, So I find it's a credit to your hard work, the ability to get that job. Um, you mentioned something. I want to go back to a detail you mentioned about how you weren't certain early in your career what you wanted to do. You saw the big consulting or management consulting, accounting, etc. And you spent a little bit of time at EY. What would you recommend someone in that was, let's say, in your position, 7-8 years ago, that's also uncertain? You benefited obviously, I think, from having gone, let's say, the more classic EY route. But would you recommend the same thing to someone maybe today? Considering your front row ventures and the work you're doing from an entrepreneurial perspective. Not to lead you on, but I'm curious to hear it, from someone that started front row.
Mhm. I think it's very interesting. I think for some people it makes a lot of sense to start a career in VC very young, but overall I think it's never a waste of time to do 2-3 years in investment banking, consulting, big law firm, whatever one of those big beasts where it's very hard to get in, and they ask a lot of you once you're there. To me, it's kind of doing almost like an extension of university, or doing like a real life MBA, in the sense that you learn really good work ethic, you learn models, you learn the ways to think about businesses. Like even the few months I spent at EY in audit, like it's really boring as hell at moments, but at the same time you need to deconstruct financial statement and match every transaction with what it means really for the business, what happened there, so you get to understand really every single detail of an entire company by going through the numbers. And then, there's a lot of things. Sometimes we're looking at an investment opportunity now at Brightspark, and I'm like, oh yes, I know this industry because I audited a boat freight company or anything like that, and you're just like, I saw this issue, or it is true that this is still very old school the way it's done in the industry, and technology could fix that. So there, you learn about a bunch of different type of companies, a bunch of industries. You're also very young when you get out of school, so kind of finding really what works with you, what kind of people you want to work with. That's one advice I always give to, I meet a lot of very driven students to French Ventures, and it's it's really the one thing that matters the most is who you're learning from, what not necessarily what you're learning from when you start your career. We we're in a beautiful world. You can switch careers, you can try a bunch of things, but the first really like hands-on mentors that you'll have that will teach you the values of how to make business decision, whatever decision it is. To me, it's the most important thing. So really like working with people that you highly respect and you aim to be is the most important thing in making those decision of joining a startup, a VC, a big firm. I think it all path can lead something somewhere great. But working with people that you highly respect and value, and that also respect and values you, and really kind of mentor you for you for real, is the most important part in picking like a first place to start your career.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to people where I find like they don't have a job, they have a passion. It's like you like what you do, and it's like you'd be almost doing it for
Mhm.
free kind of thing. Curious to talk about Brightspark and what you like the
Yes.
most about the work that you do. Like, the job of venture capitalist is obviously very varied. Curious to hear you about what are the parts of the work of the craft that you
Mhm.
enjoy the most.
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, it's definitely the people within the firm and the kind of entrepreneurs we work with. Like VC is such a relationship business at the end of the day, where no matter what stage you're investing in, it's even truer at the early stage, but you're backing entrepreneurs, you're backing people, you're backing founders. Um, we make investment decision on lots of our internal conversation, much more than actual data. So it's really the opinion, the trends that we're seeing. Having those conversations with our team is really like the main thing we're doing in terms of deciding on an investment opportunities and all the decisions that come afterwards regarding the investment. So really, the people is the most important thing for sure. And I think one thing I really like about Brightspark, and that's true in a lot of VC firm, but even true at Brightspark, is that the firm is 20 years old, but we're still building the firm. We like to say we eat our own dog food in the sense that we always advise entrepreneurs to be always innovate, always change, pivot, listen to the market, create new things, challenge the status quo. And at Brightspark, we that's kind of in the DNA of the firm. Mark and Sophie have been doing that for many years, and we can get into that as well. But we do have a quite a different investment model where we have more regular venture capital fund, but also we have an investor platform allowing accredited investors to invest in venture deal that is usually kind of an asset class that they don't necessarily have access to. So we're doing things differently, and the values that we have towards our founder and how we make investment decision, how we treat CEOs and so on, that's very important to me. And I would never work in a firm where I don't see my values and the kind of VC I want to be aligned with the ones of the partners of the firm.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And Brightspark, like you said, is one of the leaders in the space and very innovative. And I think that the challenge, that I see from an external perspective is that there's a lot of dry powder right now. There's a lot of capital, there's a lot of funds. It's getting harder to differentiate just money. So, like, why should I take from one fund versus another? But it sounds like you
Mhm.
guys are doing a pretty good job of it with your, obviously, the recent announcement you just, or the recent fund that was just announced that you just spoke about. So I'd like to hear you about some of these innovative aspects, the new fund where you said you can get secondary shares of certain technology companies that's just not available to the common investor. So I'd love to hear you riff a little bit on what makes Brightspark so special.
Mhm. I'll talk about kind of two different pieces. So in terms of how we work with entrepreneurs and our core investment thesis, Brightspark have been kind of focusing on the same thing for I want to say 15 years plus, where we really kind of found our sweet spot where we add the most value as investor for entrepreneurs, and how doing that we can generate really top decile returns for investors as well. Because as a VC, you definitely have kind of two kind of customers: the entrepreneurs you're working with or trying to convince to take your money, and your limited partners that are obviously extremely important as well. And so we really focus on early stage, so we call kind of seed to series A. We're not, really focusing on necessarily one type of name of rounds, because that's changing all the time anyway. But really focusing on, entrepreneurs that have a product in the market, have a really special technology, have some early traction, depending on the business models. That can mean revenues, that can mean like early LOIs with partners and so on. But really, we get them to like the big Series A. And I find this stage really interesting, because that's really what we do. We're not trying, we have this fund, we're deploying this point in this stage. We've been doing that for 2, 3 funds now. And there's really kind of a craft that you learn in working with a certain time of entrepreneurs in a certain stage of the business. And I think Brightspark is doing something really, really great with that. And as well as GPs, after a few funds, you kind of learn about fund dynamics. It's hard to be a first time fund manager, because there's a bit like being a first time entrepreneur, where there's a lot of early, like, initial mistakes you do when it's the first time you do something. That's just normal. When you really understand fund dynamics in terms of building the portfolio, the number of companies, how much follow on money to reserve for each portfolio company, and so on, understanding really what works what works on the spreadsheet and how to apply that in real life. Brightspark has been doing that kind of with the same strategy that obviously is adapted to the new market realities and so on. But I think we're really good at focusing on deploying this strategy of early stage in Canada, with somewhat of a smaller portfolio, high dollar allocation per company, and really generating good returns with it. So I think in terms of what really makes Brightspark special, it's that very specific expertise. We're not trying to be 3,000 different things at the same time. We know what we're good at. We know with which kind of entrepreneurs we work best, and we really focus on delivering the highest value, executing on this plan. And in terms of being different, I think a few years ago, I want to say probably like 6, 7 years ago now, the partners, I wasn't at Brightspark at the time, the partners saw a big opportunity between two funds, where a lot of their network of friends, business partners, and so on were saying, well, you know what, like, I'd invest a bit of my money in venture capital. I don't necessarily have $500,000 to commit to a 10-year fund. I don't want to necessarily do angel investment, because frankly, I'm not an expert. A lot of people, will start investing in their neighbor's cousin company, lose a bunch of their capital doing so. And they're like, I don't want to manage it myself, but I'd like to pick, company by company, in what I'm investing in. So we kind of started building a model where we create a single purpose vehicle, an SPV, to invest in a company. The SPV is managed by Brightspark, and we invite accredited investors to participate in that model, and then close that little fund. Let's say we raise $1 million to invest in company A. So for the company, they have a fund that's a Brightspark fund investing, so they don't have to deal with a bunch of angels or individual on the cap table. And for investors, then they have a professional VC picking companies for them. They still can decide whether or not they want to back this company. Like some investors, like a bit more early stage, some industries they don't want to touch, some industries they want to double down on, and so on. So that kind of started very manually, where we're like, oh, we work with Faskin as legal counsel. They helped us kind of building the structure that's repeatable and makes sense and is kind of bulletproof legal wise to do this. And we started doing that manually. When I joined, I think we probably had deployed 5 or 6 million through this model, and really we started getting some traction in terms of investors trying to join that network. So as tech entrepreneurs ourselves, we're like, well, we'll build a web platform to manage these people, because it's so much work, legal and back office, and marketing and investor communication. Like, we really wanted to deliver an credible experience for both the entrepreneurs getting money through this model and the investors participating in our funds. So we've been building that for the past few years, and now I think we've deployed around probably 40 million of private capital from individual in tech startups in Canada, and we have around 6,000 people that are subscribed to the platform. Close to 1,000 that have actually written a check and are actively investing with us. And we're building new product. We're kind of a fintech company in that sense, where we're opening up the venture asset class. And now we launched this summer an initiative to let our investor sell their units of Brightspark funds through other investors. So if they've been invested in a company for 2-3 years, there was a nice up round, they can decide to sell, usually with a discount, obviously, to another investors at the current book value. And some investors that are in it to see the company still grow and rise in value, then that it's kind of a win-win for everyone. So we're building new project. We're looking at probably introduce new asset classes also to investors. Basically, we're kind of a platform for accredited investors to access alternative investment that usually they can't really access. So that's kind of the vision long term for that part of the Brightspark business. And we're focusing on the fund we just raised, as you mentioned. We close now around 65 million. We'll get to 75 in a few months. And the fund is investing, and then every time the fund makes an investment, we create a single purpose fund. And that fund kind of co-invests with our main Brightspark fund, and individual investors can subscribe to those funds and really pick the companies they want to back through that model.
Yeah, it's such a great way, I think, to democratize, the asset class, right? Because it's hard to get into VC. Like I've done a few angel deals. I was lucky enough to invest using SPV and Lyft and SpaceX, but
Mhm.
it's pretty rare. I kind of got lucky, and it's like I find it's not as well known. So yeah, hats off to you guys to be able to do this and bring more values, create more economic gains for a much broader, segment of society, basically.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to pick your brain more about, what interests you, right, in terms of the deals you're going after. So what's exciting today in early stage?
I mean, it's a very exciting time to be deploying a new fund. As you know, like in tough times and uncertain times, in 2008 and 9, we saw a lot of the Airbnbs of this world being built and so on. And I think what we're living right now is even more interesting in a sense that it's not just like a pure financial crisis. It's a wave of change of habits and trends that we'll see. Right now as we speak, very interesting business models are emerging. People are building new things. I
Can you
think
give me an example?
I mean, I don't know what's there. That's kind of the beauty of it, is that a lot of it is probably beyond our imagination at this time. We're obviously looking at anything that connects the digital and the in-person world. Would it be in education, in entertainment, in work? Where there's a few things that we're thinking about that we're not necessarily chasing a particular business model, but trends again, like a lot of people are leaving downtown's area. What does that mean for the gig economy and a lot of the new business models that really worked in dense areas? Were kind of in terms of the logistic aspect of shipping, e-commerce. There's a lot of things we're looking at. We haven't found necessarily that one investment we want to back. We think probably a lot of the companies that are built through the new kind of COVID paradigm, if I can say, they're still very early at this stage. So we believe we'll see a lot of those kind of next industry leaders probably arise in Q2, Q3 of next year. So we're kind of patient. We're meeting a lot of interesting companies, a lot of companies that had really good technologies that were a bit maybe avant-garde before COVID, or nice to have, or becoming need to have now that companies have to kind of go online. Like there was a lot of remote work tools that some kind of more edgy companies that already adopted. Now everyone's using those tools, and a lot of the things that were really in this, I want to say probably like very widely accepted in the tech industry, or in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, all those kind of places. Now we're seeing those technology like Zoom, for example, being really used everywhere around the world in all industries and so on. So that's kind of some things we're tracking. Obviously, in healthcare is there's a lot of things happening. We're tracking that as well. I'm spending a lot of time reading about the real estate. We looked at a few prop tech companies in the past year and really haven't made an investment decision yet. And now I don't think we would invest in anything real estate linked necessarily right now, just because there's a lot of moving parts. There's definitely some really good investment to be made, but we're tracking that closely for now.
Yeah, it's interesting because you going back to how you started the conversation about, the iPhone came out, a little bit before, the last financial crisis, right?
Hmm.
You weren't still in the workforce, and now you're living through it. So I think I agree with you. There's going to be amazing opportunities in terms of like new companies being formed out of the economic wreckage, and maybe not talk about the health side, but there's going to be a lot of opportunities, right? Where a lot of older companies will not be able to adapt to the new reality,
Yes.
right? So it's like companies like it's kind of normal to be able to use Zoom and Slack, and a lot of companies are discovering it now for the first time. And I think there's going to be one of this situation where there's going to be a lot of embryonic startups coming out of this wave. I'd be curious to hear you on
Yeah.
what do you think is maybe doesn't get enough attention right now. So something a trend you think is important, but isn't
Hmm.
getting enough mainstream press or media.
Um, I think I'm not sure if you can say it's not getting enough press or media. One thing that we are thinking a lot about is food security and food access. Obviously, like online grocery deliveries and so on have really boomed, and a lot of people are just not going shopping anymore. But um, we saw it at the very start of the pandemic where the US didn't take a second to stop masks coming from Canada. We're seeing with the fires in California and everything going on, like there's probably going to be a really big shortage of produce, things like that, that we're not necessarily growing locally right now. I think every country, and we have an investment in indoor farming, and the number of inbound requests they got from so many countries during the pandemic because people are realizing like we need to be much more self-sufficient, and food is one example, but it's true with so many different things. Like during the pandemic, a lot of the manufacturing sector was just not able to get the metal parts that they usually get from China or Asia. So I think rethinking logistic with both software, IoT, AI, but also kind of reshifting, focusing on local manufacturing, local agriculture, and so on. There's a lot of interesting business models that are gonna arise from that, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree. I find it's what I think the current pandemic has shown is the importance of supply chains and building resiliency into the system, and also maybe a move away from this globalization trend that we've seen, right? So I'm not saying globalization is going to go away, but there's going to be, I think, a much bigger emphasis on national borders and national security. So how do we protect our own, our food supply chain, medicine, etc. So I think that's going to open up the door for a lot of, technology startups where before you can
Hmm.
outsource this, but now it's like each country is going to need their own technology and build upon it. Um, Maybe to switch gears a little
Yep.
bit and talk about people for a bit. So I think Brightspark is very well known for being a very
Hmm.
diverse fund, right? So having obviously, I think the first female managing partner of a fund, or obviously a very well known one. Um, with your recent addition as being a principal recent nomination, congrats by the way. I'd be curious as to
Thank you.
the importance of diversity for you personally. How do you see it as a subject? Is it something? Obviously, it seems important for Brightsport, but I'd love to hear you.
Yeah, definitely. um and it diversity is just like, obviously you need it. There's like, I don't think you should need studies to realize that yes, having women on the board or people with diverse background and diverse opinion on the board will make better decision, and will help stock price on public companies. Same thing with private. um it's just at the core of like, if you have six white middle-aged men in the same room, coming all from Harvard or whatever, same background, like they'll just tend to think the same. It doesn't mean that the way they think is less valuable than a woman coming from Africa. It's just that you need a diversity of opinions to come to the best decision. And the world is diverse, and most companies are selling to diverse customers, and understanding all the key stakeholders around your business is so important. So to me, it always kind of almost gets to me that we still have to talk about it so much. And I think one of the reason that Brightspark is so diverse is actually because of Mark Skapinker, the founder of the firm, who's still one of the two managing partners today. Like, Mark focuses so much on just the quality of people and your brain power and your values, that I like obviously see the difference between a man and a woman, but that's not what he sees first when he's speaking with someone. Like, he promoted Sophie to managing partner when she was, still young and so on, and they make the best team. And he saw that having kind of a co-managing partner with him with a different perspective and a different background really was one of the best decisions for Brightspark. And I think that's just been how we hire people. It's just kind of part of the mentality, and we obviously also try to invest in entrepreneurs that are thinking the same way. And I'm very hopeful. I think, when working with Frontier Ventures, we also make a big effort. Basically, what Frontier Ventures is trying to do is kind of build the next generation of tech leaders in Canada. Both VCs, founders, or people that will be operators in startups and so on. And so we take people when they kind of enter the tech ecosystem. So it's a big part of our mission also to push the right values to these people so that they can kind of really become amazing tech leaders with it. And so when we hire, we make sure that we have diversity on all front, and it's becoming easier and easier. I think that, every year we, both on people applying to be part of the investment team, but also people applying for funding as entrepreneurs, we see more diversity, and it comes naturally. Like this year, we had a really good stat in terms of gender diversity on the team, and really we didn't make any favorable pick for women and so on. Like, it's just when you get really quality people, and really reach all the different kind of groups of people, then you just get the best team. Like, it's it happens naturally at some point, but at first you need to kind of do the effort of, doing some campaigns and programs to really to attract more women or people from diverse background and ethnicity. And sometimes I feel like we're there, and then, something happens, or you see people um very little minded doing comments on women or anything like that, and you're like, no, there's still so much work to do. And But we're getting there, definitely. There's a lot of progress, and I think when I look at people that, my age, kind of like the associate principal level in VC, like I've never once felt like I wasn't part of the gang, even when I was the only woman in a group and so on. And I think in a few years we'll be kind of living in a different world where diversity will just be there, without people forcing it.
Yeah, that's just a great answer, Eleonore. You said it right to start. It's like it's a shame that we still have to talk about this. Like, why is this still a subject? But unfortunately, yeah, it still is. When you look at the
Yep.
cold, messy reality out there,
Yes.
and the only way it's going to change is that if people take the time and initiative, right? Like you
Yes.
guys are doing. So yeah, so hats off. Um, Maybe a random, more geek question. We spoke about productivity tools, so maybe you have an awkward segue, but it's like Slack, etc. Well, what makes Eleonore productive? Like, what's your tips?
hmm Um, I need structure. I'm like it. I like my brain goes in so many different direction when I lose structure. Like in both my personal life, like if I don't do yoga first thing in the morning when I wake up, my whole day is off. Like I just lost 24 hours. And it's kind of the same thing with work, where I really try to block off sometimes for specific things. If not, if I'm not really proactive and intentional with my time, I just get almost nothing gone. Like if you just get pulled into different things, and I see it like the weeks that I'm like, I don't feel well. I feel like I haven't accomplished all the things I wanted to do. It's usually because I stepped out of the boundaries and the structure I usually work with. Um, in terms of one thing that's funny is in terms of note taking, I've tried so many different apps, so many different systems. I really like Roam, as they raise a lot of money and it's becoming quite popular in the industry. But I kind of go back from Roam to having like a wall full of post-it, and like nothing really sticks, And I'm not sure if it's me or I just haven't found kind of the perfect match yet in terms of tools and so on. But yeah, note taking is still something that if you have any advice or people listening, if you have good systems in terms of keeping notes on stuff, I'd love to hear those.
Yeah, maybe I'll connect you with my colleague Antoine, he's like a Rome power user. I just had him actually on our Young Leader series. It's going to be live in a little bit where we talked about this,
I will
and
listen.
he's given me a we work side by side. It's been a few years, and I've always amazed at his ability to note take. And with
Mhm.
Rome, he's like gone next level. I'll maybe I'll connect you guys offline. I've on my end,
I'd love that.
I'm a little bit like you, where it's like I've tried a little bit of Notion, Rome. I'm still very paper. I feel like an old white man, where it's like I like writing. I find
Hmm.
the physical component to it makes me think better when it comes to note taking and being with
Yes.
people. But yeah, translating that
Yes.
digitally, then anyways, it's a deeper subject. I'm not the pro, but yeah, there's a lot of people that have gotten really good at it. I think that's the beauty of the web and the open nature of it is that you have all these
Yeah.
tools, all these really smart tips and tricks on how to do it really well. So yeah, very cool, subject to riff on. Maybe a final
Hmm.
question, Eleonore, is what are you most excited about, in the next few years? Like, what's the one subject, just in work in general, it could be VC you're personally excited about?
Hmm. Um, I think it's kind of going back to the fact that we're living in a crisis that will change everything, and for me, it's the first time since I'm working and really in the workforce that I'm going through something challenging. Like we were lucky in terms of seeing like a bull market, quarter after quarter, having so many different opportunities and kind of a world of abundance where last year I was on a plane every 3 days and like got to go to all those American like amazing conferences and just do so much and buy so much, and now it kind of like the world forces us to really stop, reduce, and focus on what really matters the most. And I hope that's going to translate long term. I'm not sure how long, because we live in a capitalist world. We'll see where that takes us. But in terms of in both everyone's personal life, general society values, and the tech industry of really like how can we optimize resources, how we can mm, take kind of this with okay, we've been dealt those cards, how do we make this better and make the most out of it. I hope that in terms of, again, tech business models, but also just general values of us all being human beings trying to survive and make the most out of this one little precious life we have. I really hope that the next 5-10 years will kind of be much better because of what we're going through right now.
Very, very nice and optimistic way to end the conversation, Eleonore. I just want to thank you. This has been truly inspiring. And maybe final questions. Where can people find out more, reach out, again, connect?
Yes, definitely. You can find me on Twitter, Eleonore Jarry. You can go on the Brightspark website. We have our own little podcast that we've put out during the pandemic. It's called them Spark Chats. It's only 5-6 minutes on different topic. It's like just us having coffee and talking about little trends we're seeing and questions we have about life going on right now. And yeah, LinkedIn as well. Feel free to connect. I try my best to take my Friday afternoons to just connect with people. Would it be if you're, someone thinking about joining the venture industry, someone thinking about starting a company? I really try to find time in my week always to do those little Zoom calls and so on. So do reach out and we'll find a time to chat.
Great. Well, thank you again, Leonor.
And thanks to you.